Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in today to a special edition of Live from My Drum Room, remembering Lenny DiMuzio, my dear, dear friend. Lenny is probably best known for his 40-plus years working for Zildjian as artist relations manager for most of that time and director. A couple of things just to point out. The timeliness of today's show in that Lenny would have turned 90 next week on May 4th. Lenny would have turned 90 years old. So just in talking with friends, Zildjian alumni and folks and Lenny's daughter, Therese, I just thought the timing would be great to do this today and have this, post up on YouTube on Lenny's actual 90th birthday. So that's, kind of a special thing. I'm going to be joined by Lenny's daughter, Therese, today, and also some of my old friends and Zildjian alumni, Colin Schofield, Jerry Donegan, John Sorensen, and Bill Morgan. And Rob Wallace from Hudson Music is also going to join us. And a little later on, Paul Francis, who's busy making cymbals, is going to join us. So we'll have some good stories to share. I think you'll enjoy a lot of laughs. There's so much to talk about with Lenny. I also want to, in case we forget in the heat of all the laughing and celebrating we do today, mention that this book that Lenny put out, I believe in 2009, is, actually I don't remember the year exactly, but in any case, I believe there are still copies of this available, and I will confirm that when Therese comes on. She sells this book, Tales from the Cymbal Bag, Lenny's historical and hysterical memories of Lenny DiMuzio. It's fantastic. Also, quickly, just want to apologize to Lenny's family and friends and all the drummers and artists out there that I know would have loved to have been part of this today. And we just wanted to keep this particular show a small group of people to remember Lenny. And you can bet there'll be more episodes with other folks. I know thousands of drummers that would want to come on and talk about Lenny and share their stories and tell stories about their history with Lenny. So you can be sure that's going to happen in the future, and more of Lenny's family, etc. So today is going to be just kind of a small group of us that worked with Lenny for many years, sharing our memories. Okay. So thank you for your patience and for tuning in today. It's going to be a fun show, and I see we have lots of folks watching. And so without any further ado, I'm going to welcome my guests, an esteemed panel of guests here.
Yes.
And if you folks are watching at home on Facebook, please mute your sound so we don't get that echo I just heard. But all right. So look at this. Bill Morgan is Secret Square. I'm going to start with Lenny's daughter, Therese DiMuzio, just as they appear on my screen. Rob Wallace of Hudson Music, formerly of Drummers Collective, DCI Video. Colin Schofield, Vice President of Marketing, or as Lenny used to refer to him as the advertising manager. Wild Bill Morgan, a.k.a. Sparky. Bill was our sales manager for the East Coast for many years at Zildjian.
Right.
There's Jerry Donegan, Vice President of Sales. John Sorensen, legendary, the tallest man in the company, our drumstick man for many years and many other hats that he wore. So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. This is such a fun event that we have happening right now, and I appreciate you all being here. And Therese, I'm going to just jump in with you for 1 second if you want to say anything, or if there's anything you'd like to start with, and I'm going to have Colin give a little bio on Lenny.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor to be here today and share some stories, some laughs with these esteemed guests. And Johnny, thank you for bringing us all together. And that's a wonderful thing that we can share some great memories of my dad. I have so many stories growing up in the shadows of him, seeing so many things, experiencing so many wonderful opportunities, and working at the company as well for many years, off and on, doing a lot of different things. So yeah, I know we all have some great things to share. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I'll chime in and have Colin take the floor.
All right.
And we should point out that Therese is an exceptionally gifted drummer yourself,
Thank
and a
you.
very fine musician. You're a
Thank you.
wonderful drummer.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
So
Yes.
yeah, when John and I were talking about putting this together, we felt that there's probably a good number of people that have kind of maybe heard the name of Lenny DiMuzio and somewhat aware of his legend, but probably don't understand exactly his history and what he represented. As you will certainly get to learn throughout the next hour, he was extremely unique and extremely funny, extremely charismatic. He was one in a row of one, as we say. There was really no one I've ever met quite like him. But in addition to that, it's important for people to understand the role that he played within the drum and percussion industry. And please, anybody, feel free to chime in here and correct me if I get any of the facts wrong. But Lenny began working with Zildjian in the early '60s. Up until that time, Armand himself was really the main cymbal tester. It would be Armand that was testing and sorting the cymbals and picking cymbals for the different drummers. And Armand also, was the sort of main liaison for the drummers. But as we got into the '60s, and especially after the infamous appearance of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Zildjian business just exploded. I remember Armand telling me that at the end of the year when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, that the company had 90,000 cymbals on back order. I mean, it was just the demand just exploded, just exponentially. And so obviously they, needed to grow the company and grow the business. And that's when Lenny's role really began to expand. So Lenny had known Armand, and from Lenny was a working drummer, playing in all the clubs, playing in the Combat Zone in Boston, and Armand, as we know, he loved music and would spend a lot of time in going to watch bands and listening to music, and that's how he got to know Lenny, and he invited Lenny in to join the company. So Lenny really, as the company got bigger, he took over that role of as the main cymbal tester, and also took on the role of working with the artists. Right. And I think a couple of things here. First of all, I have to explain to everybody that no one had a better ear for cymbals than Lenny DiMuzio. I mean, he had, Lenny was an exceptionally gifted musician. He was a wonderful drummer. I saw him play many times. He played the banjo, he played the spoons, he sang. He was an exceptional musician, but he had an incredible ear for cymbals. And yes, certainly he came in and Armand taught Lenny, but Lenny, developed this incredible ability to match cymbals. And soon, the top drummers, they were all, wanting Lenny to pick their cymbals. And it's important to point out that it was Lenny who trained, Leon Chiappini. Right. But it was when the company kept growing and they needed more and more help, it was Lenny that brought in Leon and taught Leon how to test and how to match cymbals. Right. And, there's a very, very specific skill. I mean, anybody pretty much can pick out one good sounding cymbal, but blending a set of cymbals together into a cymbal setup, that is an art unto itself. And right. Lenny had no equal as far as matching a set of cymbals was concerned. So Lenny really, his presence in the company became very significant. Again, now you're getting into the late '60s and the early '70s, where you have rock and roll, exploding, and it's not like yes, there was artist relations and programs in the drum industry going back to Gene Krupa and working with Slingerland in the 30s, and but when you get to the late 60s and the early 70s, now music has exploded, and you're having, it's not just jazz anymore. You have all these different styles of music, and instead of a company having a handful of drummers, now you've got 100 drummers, and I think where Lenny's really unique skill is that he could make everybody feel like they were part of a very special and exclusive family.
Right.
And he had this natural ability to do that. And it's something that Adam Nussbaum talks about all the time. It's like, and Armand was the same way. When you were talking to Armand, when Lenny was talking to a drummer, you felt like you were the most important person on the planet. And it didn't matter whether you were, black or white, whether you were a jazz drummer or a rock and roll drummer, a heavy metal drummer, or a symphony player, whether you were just starting out in your career or whether you sold, 10 million albums to Lenny and Armand, you right then and there, you were the only person that mattered to them. And Lenny had this, it was a very, very unique skill. And again, it didn't matter, as I say, whether you were black or white. He was one of the first guys to really push and get people to know about Terry Lynn Carrington. The industry had been very, very male orientated up until that point. And then here comes Terry Lynn, incredible drummer. And Lenny was, one of the first people to talk about her and get people to take her seriously. And so it really didn't matter to him. And as I say, you went from these companies, having a few drummers to take care of to now this whole kind of stable of drummers to take care of. And Lenny really, kind of formalized an artist relations program. And that's why, we refer to him as the father of artist relations. He was certainly the father of what we would consider to be modern artist relations, within the drum and percussion industry. There's no question in my mind about that. And that's and frankly, he set a standard that has rarely been matched. It was a very, very unique set of skills that he had. But he was so good at it because it came from the heart, because he loved it. He loved drummers. He loved drumming. Nothing he liked more than, sit down, with a couple of pops and talk about drums, and hang out with drummers. It was from the heart, and everybody could feel that. And that's why they responded to him the way they did.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So much heart. Yeah. Thank you, Colin. That was beautiful. That was absolutely, it was perfectly. Jerry D, you probably worked with Lenny the longest, maybe in terms of years. And if we could just jump back a second, Colin, you started at Zildjian in 82 or 3?
Actually, it was I started with them in London. I've got a funny story about that too. In 1983. So I had my first training visit to the Zildjian factory in January of 1984.
Wow.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back to that. And Jerry, you started in the late 60s at Zildjian?
Yeah, 66.
66, retired in 2011, I think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jerry, you're only 5 years old when you started?
Yeah. I almost like you, Colin.
1966. So by my recollection, you worked
45 years of happiness.
20. Well, that's like 35 or 6 years that you and Lenny overlapped together at Zildjian.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I doing the math right?
Yeah.
66. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
I had a front row seat for a great ride.
Yeah. I mean, can you, are there any stories or a story that we can tell here today, first of all?
Well, staying with the theme of Armand and Lenny, it's like, Batman and Robin. And, they were, the show was in Kansas City. It might have been a jazz educator show or PAS show or what have you. And back in those days, everybody, you double up. Not that there were a lot of people on the road back in the early 70s, but Armin and Lenny would always stay in the same hotel room. Well, I'm sure the night before they were leading the league in entertainment, probably the last ones to leave, what have you, and got to bed late. And they had an early wake-up call the next morning to get back to Boston. And they slept late, and I guess when they finally woke up, it was a dash to get packed and put on their clothes and get out to the cab and get to the airport. And I guess as they were walking through the jetway at the airport, Lenny kept tripping over the cuff of his pants. Armin couldn't realize why. When he looked down, all he saw was his stockings. And apparently they both put on one another's pants in there and get out and catch the flight.
Oh my God.
But
You can't.
you can picture it happening, right?
Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can't make this shit up.
No,
You cannot make this up. You can't.
So, yeah, it was just an absolute laugh riot together. But on the other hand, very serious about the business and what it was that they wanted to accomplish and how they wanted to make sure that whoever visited the factory was treated like royalty. I can tell you another story about when Ginger Baker came to the factory for the first Cream was playing in Boston, and I don't know what year it was probably mid to late 70s. Well, everybody was excited that they were coming and that he was coming. And sure enough, the limousine pulled into the parking area. And in those days, people would just come in a cab or a friend would drive them, but an actual limousine. So, well, this is pretty heavy duty. So Ginger steps out. He's got the flaming long red hair. He's got on a blue and white cowboy suit with more silver hanging off of it than an orthodontist workshop. And so everybody's checking him out. There's Ahmed, there's Lenny, Leon, myself, a couple of other guys. And Avidus came down. Avidus was Ahmed's father, and he kind of wiggled his way in between all of us. And he's looking at Ginger. He gave Ahmed a whack on the chest, and he said, "Get cash."
Get cash.
he left with gongs and crotales and more cymbals than you could shake a stick at. And I don't know, he whipped out a wad of hundreds, and he didn't even put a dent in it. So that was, I think, Ginger's first experience with Zildjian up close and personal, and certainly Zildjian's up close and personal experience with him. And it, history being what it is, obviously it went extremely well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking for the photo. There's a photo of Colin. You mentioned playing the spoons, that MD festival when Ginger played, and at the banquet at the end of the festival on Sunday night. I'll try to find it. Rob, you might have it somewhere, possibly.
Yeah.
But there's a picture of Lenny and Ginger sitting together, and Lenny is entertaining Ginger playing the spoons. And
dying. He was laughing so much. Yeah.
He couldn't believe it. He's going, "This is unbelievable!" It's just.
Beyond that, there's one other thing that I forgot to mention, just in terms of Lenny's legacy. In addition to the symbol testing and the artist relations side of things, he was very significant in the development of the Zildjian range of cymbals.
Yep.
Yes.
mean, again, when he started with Zildjian, there was a couple of models of ride, and there was a thin crash and a heavy crash, and he was that conduit with the drummers. Was the one that was talking with all the drummers, and especially when heavy rock came along and as music developed and jazz rock and everything, and Lenny was feeding all that back in and coming, and really had a very significant role in developing, what we consider sort of the modern range of cymbals. I mean, there are many examples of this, but most famously was the new beat hi-hats.
Mm-hmm.
The new beats, don't let anybody tell you anything different. But it was Lenny that developed the new beat hi-hats and crucially also named them. you know, that was Lenny's name. I always remember him saying, well, I said, well, Lenny, how did you come up with the name? And he's saying, it's the new beat, you know, they're playing the new beat. And
Oh, yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, I think 14-inch new beat hi-hats is still the company's #1 bestseller to this day. So, you know, he had a very, very significant role on cymbal design and cymbal development.
Yep.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, I remember very, very much so with him bringing home prototypes and just listening to them. And that was the ping ride, and then the flat top, the swish cymbal, actually the Burma bell, and developing all of the sounds, and then consulting with the drummers to see what they wanted, something you needed, a special effects cymbal. So then he would curtail the style for what they wanted. Yeah, it was very interesting. Seeing everything on the dining room table.
You know,
Yeah.
over
catalogs
the
and everything else. Yeah.
over the years, having had a chance to work with, a number of great drummers, and, a lot of mostly Zildjian drummers for, big period of time, their respect for Lenny, both as a human being, his big heart, and his ears of being able to, they could describe something over the yeah.
Wow.
It's a story. That's a funny story. But they would describe over the phone, and a sound they were looking for, and Lenny would pick out the cymbals and send it to him. He shipped them the cymbals. Neil particularly, it was funny. I remember after getting to know Neil a little bit, he would talk about Lenny, and Neil was notorious. He never would make a phone call. It was always, in the old days, mail. Everything was through the mail. Then eventually it was email. But Lenny would say, this guy, I just wish he would call me and tell me what he needs. We're writing back and forth all the time, and then I have to ship him cymbals. But Neil, for one, as everybody did, just loved him to death, and had so much respect, for him as like I said, as a person, and for his ears in picking out cymbals. And really going back to what Colin said, as music changed, drum sets got bigger, lots of cymbals, had a match, and he had that ability to make them all fit like they were cohesive. And it's really going back to, Colin, you really said it, and it really rang a bell when you said that. I hadn't really thought about that, but a lot of the guys.
He was the master.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we were talking earlier. I don't want to say much here because I was just a fly on the wall for most of this stuff. Not like you guys that were in the trenches, but the era, that period of time was so special and so different than I think what it's like now out in the business world of, drums and guitars and artist relations and artist relations with companies. We all witnessed something that, I think about it a lot, and I've been, obviously seen Armin and Lenny and most of you guys in a long time, but there's such memories there of the camaraderie that was within the drum industry, really, and that was just really special. And Lenny and Armin were definitely at the at the forefront of a lot of that. I have a picture here that I'd also like to mention. Lenny's sort of partners in crime, in addition to Armand, Jim Coffin and Lloyd McCaslin from Remo.
Fantastic.
Great picture. Those three guys had an incredible history. So you have Yamaha, Zildjian, obviously with Lenny, and Lloyd from Remo, and Jim was the head of Yamaha drums, I should point out. But the three of them had a relationship that was really unique, and they got business done, but they enjoyed life. All three of those guys worked hard and played hard.
Yes.
And they could out-hang anybody.
Yeah.
Out-hang anybody. I remember after the Zildjian Day in New York, after the infamous party at Drummers Collective after the Zildjian Day in New York, We ended up, I was with Vinny, and we ended up in Jim Coffin's hotel room at the Grand Hyatt, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And Vinny and I know I'm like 24 years old. Vinny was, a couple of years older than me. And we're exhausted. We're ready to go to bed. And Jim Coffin and Lenny, they're just getting started. They're on the phone. The bar in the hotel was closed, but you could order booze, for room service. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And Lenny's like, shall we get a shrimp cocktail? Yeah. We'll get 3 shrimp cocktails. And he's ordering drinks. And Vinny and I are looking at each other going, man, I got to go to bed. I'm done. And they're still going strong. I mean, just incredible. Just,
Wind.
I want to get Wild Bill and Johnny S in a second, but Colin, talking about the Zildjian Day, the one that we did in 1990. So this would have been like 6 years later in New York. Jerry, you were there.
Oh yeah.
Wild Bill, I'm sure you were there, Colin. And we had a great Zildjian Day that day. Steve Smith was on the bill that year. I think Dave Weckl.
Yeah, Weckl. Ian Wallace, I think.
Ian Wallace, Tristan Bowden, some really great, Kenny Aronoff. Right. We went to that Nirvana that restaurant over Central Park.
That's right.
Had a great dinner. Lenny and Armin opted to pass on the dinner, and they said, you guys go. Lenny was, Johnny, you guys go do the hang with the guys. We'll see you later on. And they stayed at the hotel. Jerry, I think you stayed at the hotel with him. Yeah. Okay. So jump in at any moment. We come back from a nice dinner.
And then we went out to the China Club after that.
We did. Okay.
Yeah. We came back real late.
But I remember we came back to the Mayflower, the hotel we used to stay at. Bill used to call the Mayflounder. Come back to the Mayflower Hotel in the bar. And the bar's closed, but there's Lenny behind the bar, tending bar.
Yeah. With a blonde wig on.
With a blonde wig on, mixing drinks for people. And we're like, Lenny, is this okay? Yeah, Johnny, what do you want? What do you want to drink? Finally, security came and said, you got to go. You guys got to go. And Lenny took a bottle of something just to go. Crown Royal to take back up to the room. And I think they might have stopped him along the way and said, you can't take that. But I mean, it was one of the funniest.
And that night, that's when we came back, and I remember Weckl telling me it's 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. He presses the elevator button to go up to his room, and the doors open, and there's Lenny standing in the elevator with the blonde wig on.
Could have been with Freddie Gruber too. You never know. I mean, Freddie, usually it would be those two guys would be the last one standing. But I know. Talk about like, oh my God, the stories. But Wild Bill, why don't you jump in with one that you?
It's funny. I'm glad you touched on how funny he was, because he was absolutely hilarious. And I just wanted to share the first time I met him. I had gone through this interview process, and I think, Johnny, you went through the same experience. So the very last thing you do before you get hired from Zildjian is you go into the drummer's lounge, and they got a drum set up there, and you go in, and there's Armin Zildjian and Lenny, and they give you a pair of sticks, and they say, there you go, buddy. Let's see what you got. I hadn't played drums for over 6 years. So I get on the drum set, and diff-daff, extremely horribly bad. And I get up from the drum set, and Lenny comes over, and and this is it. It's between me and one other guy for the job. And Lenny puts his arm on my shoulder, and he says, "Geez, I'm sorry, kid. I wouldn't have made you play if I knew you had polio." Unbelievable. So it was just so good. And then one of the other things, is Lenny had this innate ability to fall asleep anywhere and anything he wanted. So
oh my God,
getting back to Neil Peart, we were in Boston at the Boston Garden, went back to see him, blah blah blah. So we go out, and we're like maybe 7 rows back, and the band starts, and they're playing, and it is louder than you don't even know. So you can't even think. All of a sudden you look over, there's Lenny. He's sound asleep through the whole thing. And for you guys that know Neil, you know how astute he is, and when he's there, I mean, he's looking and he's doing all this stuff. Right. So it was one of these rare shows that he actually had to fly, and he had to get on a plane, and I think they were going to South America. And so about 4 hours later, I get a text from Neil. Oh, I had texted him and said, "Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Everything was great." And he said, "Oh, thanks a lot. We're over Miami." Some stupid thinking. And he said, "Yeah, just wondering, how did Lenny enjoy the show?" And as you know, Neil is so intelligent and smart, and you never want to, so I'm sitting there going, "Oh, what do I say?" And then finally, Neil hits me back and he says, "Is he awake yet?" Just to this day, I'm just so happy I didn't try to bullshit him and say, "Oh, God, Lenny thought it was the best thing." Yeah. But of course, when Lenny woke up, unbelievable, incredible. I mean, those cats, Jesus, those guys are great. Okay, Lenny. He was incredible. And one other thing, when you say he was the last, Therese, you know this, Lenny didn't live far from me, and I used to have a bunch of pool parties here.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
But, younger people, and honest to God, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you were there, it'd be like, "Lenny, we got to go to bed. We got to go to bed. We're done here."
Yeah.
So he had hangability big time.
He was the king of hang.
The king of hang. And Bill, let me just say, Bill Morgan, for you to say to Lenny, "We got to go to bed," that's saying something.
That's, what? That's when you concede to the master. I mean, that's when you know what's going on. So.
Oh my God.
I think
Welcome, Paul. Welcome, Paul Francis. First of all, taking a break from hammering cymbals.
I'm done for the day. I've been here since 6 o'clock, so I'm all done.
All right. Well, Paul, we're gonna jump back to you in a second, but Johnny S, can you share? Yeah, you do too. Johnny S, you got a PG story you can?
Yeah, that's absolutely the trouble, John. You have to find ones that pass muster. But so when I came into Zildjian, Lenny was on the, I would call probably on the downside at that point. And I would remember the first time I went into his office to ask him something, and the chair was turned. He had this big black chair, and he had it turned around. The lights were down in the office, the curtains on the glass, things were down. And I'm like, Mr. DiMuzio, can I ask you something? Right? Not that I go around. I thought he was dead. He was out of it. It's like 2:30 in the afternoon, right? And everyone's hopped up at Zildjian. We're all, we gotta do this again. And he's out like a light. So I go to our dear friend Annette Macamo, who God bless her, would often have to take care of things. And she goes, "Oh, that's just Lenny. Don't worry about it."
Did he have the phone on his chest?
Yeah.
Oh, Kennedy was on the phone.
Yeah. Just absolutely, just could sleep anywhere. I would remember doing presentations at sales meetings and stuff, and I'm trying to read the room and do my shucking and jiving, and Lenny and Armin would be asleep. They'd be out of it, and everyone would go, "Just let him sleep. Don't worry about it."
Well, Colin and Jerry and Bill, you know what he used to call that? Yeah, just recharging the batteries. I'm just recharging. Right. And then
he could sleep standing up. Let's not forget.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
A great quick story I'm going to tell. We had gone down to Modern Drummers' grand opening of their new office. This would have been like in the early 90s when they moved to this brand new office. They had a big reception, like an industry-wide. We all went down. We used to fly in those days to New York. We all flew down. I think Armin was with us too, but it was Colin, myself, Lenny, Armin. I think, John, it might have been just before you started, but we had spent like the afternoon at Modern Drummer. They had all this food, drinking wine, and then we had a dinner plan that night, I believe, with Kathy Rich. And Jerry, I don't know if you would, but at like an Italian restaurant in New York, somewhere like Midtown. Anyway, we go back to one of the hotel rooms, and we were planning what we were going to, like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And Lenny is asleep against the wall. He had leaned up against the wall in the room, and he just had like at the power nap. He had his eyes
Nap.
closed for like 15 minutes, and then he was back, and he's like, "Okay, fellas, where are we going now?" Like, you know, it was, let's go hit Manny's or let's go hit Sam Ash, and like there was nobody like him that could.
Right.
And then, you know, hang later than everybody.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
that he needed that
Without a doubt.
15 minutes to recharge the batteries, and then boom, he was gone. He was off.
Absolutely.
But-
But he did, you know, as we were talking earlier, that I'd say my takeaway from what I learned from Lenny, because we all did learn from Lenny a lot, was his sense of, he had no ego. He
Yeah.
treated everybody the same. And like you said, whether it was, you know, a rock and roll guy that, you know, he had never heard one of their songs or knew who they were, but boy, he knew if you were in the Zildjian company family, and if you were coming here, and if Johnny D or somebody or Colin thought that this guy was important, then Lenny knew this guy was important. He just had that natural sense of who the real cats were and who the real cats weren't. And he yeah, there you go. And, you know, I just learned, again, in an industry that is very easy to get, you know, full of your ego and records on your walls and who knows who. You know, Lenny just was so gracious about it. He didn't care, had no ego. Just let's have a good time. Let's talk drums. Let's just be cool. And and Armin was the same way. Armin was, again, very egoless, and just, you know, it was just amazing coming in from the outside, where you're like, oh my God, we're around, you know, all these, you know, of our idols, and these two guys were the idols of the idols.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember going to see Dave Weckl, I think Johnny and Colin and Lenny, and at the end of the show, there's all these people from Boston there, and who did Dave go beeline to?
Right.
Lenny.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember all these kids from Berkeley with their notebooks and everything, looking and trying to go like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Like, it's like, well, if you know who the cats are, you know that's Lenny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember at Lenny's funeral, Bill, you read a beautiful message from Neil Peart. Neil couldn't be there, and I remember one of the phrases that I took away. I think you had come up with it, Bill. I don't know if Neil had said it, but you know, you referred to him as the rock star of the rock stars, and I thought that was perfect. You know, he was the rock star's rock star, like, and that's a great description, John. Yeah, it's like, yeah, he was in his element around these guys. They loved him. Like you said, that's so key what you said, the no ego. And I like to think that those of us that came after Lenny, you know, learned so much. I learned so much just from being around him. We used to travel a lot in those days, to PASIC or to the Modern Drummer Festival or someplace or NAMM, or just going to local shows. We'd go to Great Woods a few nights during the week in the summertime.
Oh, yeah.
And you just learned just from being around him, and Armin too. But I spent more time with Lenny, and just the way he was so comfortable. He didn't bullshit anybody. He didn't try to be someone he wasn't.
Right.
And that's why people loved him, because he didn't try to take over a conversation, and when someone's talking, go, well, yeah, well, you know, I do it this way or something, and he just, you know, and that's what everybody loved about him. He was just such a, you know, his humanity, just a humble guy.
He mentored us. He mentored us all. When you think about it, he really did.
Yeah, kind, generous, do anything for you.
Yeah.
His heart. He just had a huge heart, you know, and that to me is what always shined through. You know, even at you know, at the end of the day at PASIC, after, you know, guys whacking on cymbals for 8 hours, and he'd say, oh, you know, the guy's got to come in at, you know, 4:45, and I figure 15 minutes I'm out of here. And he says, Mr. DiMuzio, can you show me every symbol you got?
Yeah, it wasn't quite the words that he used, but yes.
Oh yeah. Young Paul,
Yeah.
I'd love to get a story if you can share one. I know you were an up and comer, kind of at that time.
Well, I'll was searching for some PG ones, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I remember my first NAMM show was in 1996, and we were all still wearing suits, and I remember Colin saying, "Oh, is that the suit that you graduated high school in?" And I said, "No, it's the suit I'm going to be buried in. I thought I'd try it out first." But the show, I remember the show getting out. And I was just this, wide-eyed, I can't believe I'm at the NAMM show, and this thing is huge. And I'm standing on the booth, and it's 6 p.m. and everybody's like leaving, and I'm just like kind of, in awe that I'm there. Lenny walks off the booth, and then he turns around, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Hey, you got dinner plans?" I go, "Yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on. I don't know what I'm doing." He goes, "Come with me. I'll introduce you to all the cats." So we went to some educational dinner, and he introduced me to everybody. And I remember the end of the table that I was sitting at, and a couple of the guys said, "Well, if you're with Lenny, then you know what you're doing." He gave you credibility, which was really, really fantastic.
That's right.
So, but I remember, and I hope I'm not remembering this incorrectly, but I have a very good memory, in my opinion. The Tony Williams visit, and it was 3 days of pure fear on my part with this, because Leon said if I looked sideways at Tony Williams, I was going to get fired. So I kept my mouth shut for 3 days, believe it or not. But at the end, when everything was wrapping up, and Debbie and Craigie came down, and Johnny and Colin came down, and Lenny came down to the drummers lounge to kind of say goodbye and thanks for coming in, and hope everything continues after he went home. And for some reason, Tony squinted at his eyes and looked at Lenny and goes, "Oh, you know what? I need to talk to you." And Lenny, big grin. He's like, "Yeah, about what?" And he goes, "You guys did this, I don't know, cymbal selection video with somebody named, what's his name? Marvin Smitty Smith. Who the fuck is that? You guys don't want to do a cymbal selection video with somebody that's known for their cymbal sound?" And Lenny just paused, and he looked at him, and he said, "Oh, stop being such a fucking crybaby." And I couldn't believe it. And I went, "Oh," and I'm like, "Lenny doesn't work here anymore. He's getting fucking fired right now. Tony's going to go over there." And what Tony did was he realized he was being ridiculous. And a big smile came on Tony's face, and he just started laughing. And then he and Lenny started talking. So, but I couldn't believe he said it to Tony Williams. I was just like, "Oh my God, I was told to keep my mouth shut, and I kept my mouth shut, and you're telling him not to be a fucking crybaby?" It's like, wow. So,
Colin,
those are safe ones.
Paul,
segue to. Oh. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Trace.
Sorry, no, Paul, I just on that note, because Tony came in one day, Tony Williams, and I worked with him in the vault, and then we went into the drummers lounge, and I said, "Okay, Dad, you got to give me the skinny. What does he want? What does he need?" He says, "Just whatever he needs. You just keep him happy." And we were in the vault picking out all beautiful Ks, and he was like a kid in a candy shop. He was just a joy to be with, and it was a great experience. I mean, to work with one of the greatest and incredible ears. So yeah, and everything was all copacetic with that. There he is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah. Oh.
But I just before we move on to something, it's a great segue for Colin. I'll let you tell the story about the Gary Chafee visit, which we remembered recently.
Yes. Okay, so oh God, I can't even remember. What it must have been in the 90s,
early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah.
So this was the era when kind of getting a hair weave was de rigueur. There was a lot of balding men that were getting hair weaves. So anyhow, it was one day, and Gary Chafee comes in, to pick cymbals, and he's had a hair weave done, and it was extremely obvious, to say the least. And I think I remember. I think you greeted him first, John, and you come into my office, and you're like, "Just don't look at his head." Gary's had this hair weave done. Like, I just want to warn you. Be careful. Avoid eye contact. it's just, and so, oh my God. So I go in, and it's Austin Powers. You're like, don't look, don't look at his head. And Leon's there, and we're in the coffee room, and everybody's like trying not to look at Gary. No one's saying a thing about it. It's like, oh, Gary, so what symbols are you looking for today? What are you doing? Avoiding, the subject like play. And eventually Lenny walks in, comes into the break room, and he sees us, and without missing a beat, first thing out of his mouth, "Hey Gary, I see you've got a new barber."
And
not how you doing, what's going on. It's just the first thing he goes, "Hey Gary, I see you got a new barber." And we
Chafee
all cracked up,
We died. And to Chafee's credit, Gary Chafee says, "I was waiting for one of you fucking guys to say something." Like, Chafee started laughing. He's going, "I was wondering, when one of you guys," it took Lenny to come in and, break the ice and go, "Oh my God. Yeah.
So I've got one other story about Lenny's expenses at the NAMM show. So there was, I don't know, Lenny reported to me for I don't know how many years it was. So I used to have to sign off on his expense form. Now, trying to get Lenny to kind of write a memo or write anything, I mean,
keep a receipt.
It wasn't going to happen. But filling out his expense forms, and this is back in the day, it was nothing electronic. You had an expense form, and you had to hand write everything. And these things, they were like little works of art, because Lenny had very neat handwriting, and and he'd write out these elaborate descriptions of who he had dinner with and the date and everything. I mean, they were absolutely, they were immaculate. They were, I mean, they're not only were they great works of art, they were great works of fiction as well. But that's another story. But
Papa Joe Jones, Big Sid Catlett.
Well, no, this is a true story.
It gets better.
So Lenny had, when he came out to the NAMM show, there was a whole gang of the West Coast cats that would just be waiting to see him. And he had a group of them. It was Steve Schaefer, famous studio musician, and Johnny Guerin, and there was Larry Bunker. I think there was a few of those older guys.
Oh, that's great.
From the studio days, and they all knew Lenny, and they'd all go out and hang with him. So so basically year after year, Lenny, he would just copy the same names from his previous NAMM shows. He'd keep copies of all his old NAMM show receipts. He couldn't remember who he took out to dinner each night. I mean, he would go out to dinner every night with a whole bunch of people. Right. And so he would just write out, very neatly and very authentically, he'd write out all the names and list the names of all the drummers that were at the dinner. And one year, he's given it to me, and I'm going through it, and I have to approve all these things. And so I see one, and I remember going to his office. I said, "Lenny, you're going to have to redo this one. Nick Ceroli died last year."
Oh no.
Colin, there's a picture of him showing me these reports, and I was saying, Lenny, these things are so full of bullshit from the beginning to the end. So, what do you mean, Bill? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Oh my God. Yeah, I remember flying home from a NAMM show with him or PASIC or something. And he'd say something like, gonna do a little creative writing tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. And who was Ed Sorrentino? Because Lenny used to have dinner with him every Friday night.
Local drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great teacher. Great local teacher.
Same day, for every Friday, same restaurant. It's like, who is this Ed Sorrentino guy?
Colin, I gotta tell you this one. When he came over to Sabian, we had the office down the street, and Lenny would come in around 11 as usual,
right?
And get in time for lunch. And so we had this great place across the street, Jamie's. It was like a bar, restaurant kind of thing. So Lenny got his first credit card from the company. So he's like, come on, fellas, I'm buying, we're going over there. So we all go over, we're all ordering up, having a good time. So I knew the bartender, this guy Scooter, and I said, Scooter, when he gives you the card, come back and tell him he's got a $25 credit limit on this one.
Oh,
So the bill comes and it's like $190 or whatever. So here's Lenny dusting off a brand new Sabian card, going to put it down. And this guy comes back as serious as a heart attack. And he says, geez, I'm sorry, Lenny, there's a $25 credit limit. What? Jesus, what kind of bullshit is this? We had him going for like 10 minutes. It was absolutely, he lost his mind. It was a riot because yeah, I mean, you know how many credit cards he probably wore out at Zildjian. I think he had like 4 replacements a year.
Yep.
He was good at it. So yeah.
He loved a good joke though.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He used to keep a napkin filled with jokes. He'd write them down on napkins from restaurants and bars. And he'd have a collection after a convention of like 5 elastics in his pocket from all the drummers. He says, one day I'm going to write a book of all jokes.
Yeah. He always had, can I tell another quick story?
Yeah. Sure.
Do you guys remember the PASIC in '97 at Disneyland? Paul, I think, John, you were definitely there.
It was my first one.
Yeah, okay, you were there. And we had
My
the big
first trade
party
show.
for Lenny. That was the year he won the industry award, the PAS Industry Award, the President's Award. Yeah, we had the roast. And Jerry's suite. I think it was your suite, Jerry.
No,
right?
we booked the suite especially for it. Jerry, trust me, Jerry didn't get to stay in suites like that. No, we booked that penthouse suite just for the party.
Well, so my role in this was after the banquet, we went somewhere, and you guys, Colin, you said to me, you've got to figure out a good ruse to get Lenny up to the room. Yeah. Because Lenny and Leon, and maybe you, Paul, were going to go out somewhere, like to go out and get some entertainment. And
Leon
I said to Lenny,
almost ruined it.
Exactly, Leon. All right, so I said to Lenny, Lenny, I just got a hold of this great tape that you're going to love to see. Block your ears, Therese. It's a great video. He said, Johnny, how you going to watch a video? I said, I've got a VCR in my room. He said, how'd you get a VCR in your room? I said, I ordered it special in my room. And he said, and I'm thinking, I'm going to lose this. And he's going, all right, yeah, we'll go up and watch the tape for a little bit, and then we'll go out. And I said, yeah, I'll go with you. I'll go, but let's go up and watch this. You're going to love this video. So I take him up to the designated suite, and I swear, this was one of the funniest things about it was we walk in if you remember, that it was like a hallway in the suite. You walk in, it was kind of like and he walks like a foot into the room, and he looks around and he says, how did you get a room like this? He said, Johnny, how'd you pull that off? And then all of a sudden, everybody yells, surprise! And that's the look on his face right there when
that's a great picture.
When he realized the party was for him. I think he saw somebody, and they he said, oh, hey, hi, he had no idea this party was for him until everybody said, Lenny, it's your night, and that was just a hilarious. And then, of course, the rest of the night is a story unto itself.
Mm-hmm. And there's a video of that.
Oh my God! Yeah, yeah. And the look on his face there is kind of like, what are you guys doing here? And my wife wanted me to remind me of the story about how my wife's name is Kelly. Those of you who don't know her, and he used to call Kelly and her sister Tracy Kathy. And both of them, Kathy, and it was a classic. And I said, he used to call the Collado sisters, one of whom is Kathy, both Carol and Kathy. And she said, well, maybe it was every woman that worked in drumsticks was Kathy. So many endearing qualities about Lenny. I mean, just hilarious stuff. I love that picture, Rob.
Do you want me to tell the story with Vinny at Great Woods?
Yes, Colin, you have to tell that story. Yeah.
To me, this is one of my fondest memories of Lenny. So again, to explain the big summer outdoor, I don't even know what it's called now, but when back in the day, it was called Great Woods. It was the outdoor shed, where all the bands would be playing in the summertime. And so, during the height of the summer, I mean, we'd be, as you said, John, we'd be going there, 3-4 times a week. I mean,
Oh,
there
yeah.
was
Easy.
bands playing every night, and invariably it was a Zildjian guy, and it would be you, me, and Lenny, and maybe someone else would come along, but it was always at least you, me, and Lenny.
Yeah.
So now we've been doing this for several years, without getting into the highway geography, but basically there was a Sheraton hotel in Braintree. And so what we always did, we would all meet and park our cars at the Sheraton hotel in Braintree, and then we would carpool in one car to drive together to Great Woods, which was in the town of Mansfield. So the Sheraton was in Braintree, which was at the meeting of Route 3 and 93, and then you could get onto 95 going south. So we've been doing this for several years. I mean, it was a standard thing, and it was conveniently placed so all three of us could drive home easily after the gig. So this was I think one of the first tour that Vinny did with Sting, or certainly early on. So obviously, it's a big deal. We're excited to go and see Vinny. He's playing with Sting, and
I think it was 91.
It was
1991.
The usual thing. We're like, Lenny, okay, so regular deal. Vinny's doing a runner after the show, so he wants us to come early because we're going to hang with him before the show because they're leaving straight away after. So we'll meet you at the meet at the Sheraton at whatever time it was. So it's like, yeah, sure, okay. So anyway, so John and I, we both drive up to the Sheraton, and then we're sitting there, and it's like, okay, well, Lenny's always a little bit late, and we're sitting there, and an hour goes by, and there's no Lenny. He doesn't show up, and we're starting to think, this is the days before cell phones, where we're like, we're going to be late. We're just going to have to bail. You're like, I hope Lenny's okay, but Vinny's going to be wondering what has happened to him. So we get in the car and we drive, and we get to Great Woods, and we think, well, maybe Lenny just thought he was meeting us at the gig, so we waited outside for a little while, and in the end we were like, geez, we got to go in and see Vinny. So we pick up the passes and everything, and we go back and we see Vinny, and we're like, yeah, Vinny, we're sorry we're so late, but we don't know what happened to Lenny. We were sitting waiting for him for over an hour, and he never showed up. And Vinny looks at us and he's like, what do you mean? I mean, Lenny's been here for over an hour. And we're like, what? So
Wasn't he?
And this is the part I'll never ever forget. So Vinny walks us into the back, and Lenny is in Sting's private dressing room, where there's like security guards outside, but Vinny escorts us in, and Lenny's sitting on this beautiful luxury leather couch.
Of course he
got
is.
This, big glass goblet full of a very expensive red wine, and he's sipping the red wine, and he's chatting with Sting, and he and Sting are on the couch, and they're in deep in conversation, and they're both sipping the red wine, and they're, having this deep. And then Lenny turns around and sees us, and he goes, "Where the fuck were you guys?" And we're like, Lenny, where were you? We were waiting at the Sheraton for over an hour. He goes, oh, well, you can't have been. I was waiting at the Sheraton for over an hour. And I said, well, where were you waiting? He goes, the Sheraton Mansfield. I was waiting outside the
Oh, God.
We're like, what, the Sheraton in Mansfield? Why on earth would that's around the corner from the venue. Why would we be waiting there?
Yeah, we never, ever met there,
Never, ever met there. But for some reason, he thought that's where we were meeting.
Oh,
but I will never forget. He's sitting on the couch with the wine, and he's chatting deep in conversation with Sting. And then he sees us, and he's like, "Where the fuck were you guys?"
I think he might have even introduced us to Sting. These are my friends, Colin and John from Zildjian.
What's your name again?
That is like, oh my God, it was one of the funniest.
So funny.
And we just laughed about that for years. I have one more quick, and this is kind of a Neil story, when Neil was still with Zildjian. And I remember the year was 2002 because Jim McGathy and I, who I'm going to read a message from Jim who couldn't join us, but Jim and I had gone down to Mohegan Sun in like early summer of 2002 Colin, you might remember we had put him on the Zildjian box set, and you had given me some mock-ups to show him. So it was sort of, Jim was excited to come along because he was a big Neil fan. And it was one of the first times I really got to sit and talk to him. And he was such a wonderful person, Neil. So anyway, so it was just Jim and I on that. And then they came back and played the Garden in the fall of 2002. And I don't know if you came with us, Trace. Paul, I think you might have been with us, but Jim and I definitely went, and Lenny.
I was there. I remember going to both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you did. Okay. And do you remember we had seats that were like a front row or some crazy, amazing, great seats, like Incredibles. We're sitting
We
in the
always had
garden.
front row with Neil.
Yeah, this was incredible. So this was like maybe 4 or 5 months later when they played Boston. And so I think we saw Neil before the show, and we had presented like a shadow box in recognition, for your contributions to music kind of thing. We presented it to Neil and took a picture. And then I think we all took a group photo together, which I can't locate it. And I remember Neil saying, he said, would you mind if we just get a picture of me and Lenny?
Oh, that was
and
at the Garden. That was at the
Garden.
I remember.
Yeah. Do you remember that? So and I just thought that was so beautiful. He said, and I remember he said, the old guard. How about a picture of the old guard? And I think he was looking at me, who's not young, but me and Jim and Paul, and thinking like, yeah, you guys you're the up and comers, but this is the guy right here. Yeah, this is the guy. And so I want a picture with just him. And it was a nice moment. And we took that picture of Lenny and Neil together.
So there was
and we had to find a cup of coffee for him so he could bring it to the second row. And saying, excuse me, because we were late getting to our seats, and he didn't want to. He was trying not to spill the styrofoam cup of coffee. He had to have a cup.
I didn't remember that.
I don't.
So a few years ago, Johnny, on the Neil Peart story, we had a photo shoot for Zildjian. So it was my dad and I. We went out to the Worcester Centrum very early to get Neil, and then put some like paper clips, to tighten up his shirt so he looked. It was kind of fluffy of a shirt. So we were there for a few hours just doing the photo shoot. And Neil said, I want you to stay to have dinner with us. And he says, I want to have dinner with you too. And my dad's like, sure, that's great. We're not going to leave anywhere. So there were all these Italian tablecloths. And then there was salami and mortadella hanging in the backstage area. So it looked like a little Italian restaurant from the North End or from Federal Hill in Rhode Island. It was beautiful. And they got Connie Francis and, singing Amina Corre in the background. So Larry Allen at the time was the drum tech. So he brought us out to the drum set, and I got to, play on Neil's kit and just hear them, live right there. So we're waiting for Neil to just do some logistics. So we leave the drum set and we go backstage again, and we're hanging out. So we're sitting at the table, and Neil comes in. And, he's got his new clothes on and stuff. And we had finished up the photo shoot and all the logistics and cleaned up the equipment. And then who comes in but Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. And it was just the four of us at the table. And I was in awe to be sitting down with these legends. And it was just an incredible dinner. And they sat there the whole time, and they spoke about their life and their family and their kids. And it was quite an experience to be there with them. And then Larry had come in, and he said right before their show, they usually take a French lesson. So, and then Neil practices a bit. So then it ended up that they left. Then later that evening, they had a private party in Worcester with the band. And then my dad and I went over to party with Rush. That was another whole story.
Oh my God.
So they closed the club, and Alex Lifeson was the life of the party. So we had an incredible evening, but it was a full-fledged day, but he kept up with everybody, which he was the Energizer bunny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. And he had that way about him that, the guys in the band felt comfortable. I'm sure they didn't do that with everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Very unique treatment. And that too with Armand and Maynard Ferguson. Funny story with them. Maynard, coincidentally, his birthday is also May 4th.
Right. That's
oh,
right.
Wow, that's right.
So every time Maynard would come in, Armand would call me and he'd say, "Hey, yeah, we're going to see Maynard." He says, "Pick me up." He says, "Pick me up at 6 o'clock. We'll go for dinner and then we'll go see Maynard." And then pile in the car and then we'd go into Boston. And Maynard loved Armand, and just the three of them were like the three amigos. So we'd be sitting there like 20 minutes into the show, and then Armand would be there and he'd just be like, with his drink and what have you, and waiting to get called. And then Maynard would look over to Armand and say, and Armand would go up on stage and grab a trumpet. Then he would go and play Hey Jude with the band. And he was the highlight of every show. And Maynard loved it. Armand loved it. And it was just an incredible experience, because there's Armand walking down at these theaters playing Hey Jude, all these clams.
He was a horrible player.
Yeah.
But it was an experience of just the joy to see him in his element. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
So
I remember my first NAMM show in 1989, and the whole routine of marching and the NAMM band.
Yeah.
That whole
Yeah.
ritual of your first NAMM show with the Zildjian company.
Yeah.
And seeing Armin and Lenny, Lenny's like, "Yeah, Johnny, it'll be fun. Don't worry about it. It'll be fun." Yeah. And I'm
You
like
got a free
nervous.
Bloody Mary.
Yeah. And they're like the stars of the show. You know what I mean? Like everybody, there's Larry Lincoln back in the old days, Link.
Yep.
And and it was just like they were the two of them were rock stars. And that following year at PASIC was my first PASIC was Zildjian. And do you remember that we were sitting there in the I was telling Omar Hakim this story because Omar was at that PASIC that year. And we're sitting in the banquet, and Lenny and Armin were throwing rolls at Sandy Feldstein.
The
Like
Sandy
they were just
Feldstein
tossing.
was-
Yeah, he was like the outgoing president or something.
Ducking bread rolls. Yeah.
And they're like chucking these rolls at him. Oh my God. Oh,
Good. Colin, I don't know if you remember I think it was one of the last NAMM shows in Chicago. And it was the show had ended. We always stayed at the Hyatt. And as you know, the Hyatt has beautiful foyer and all sorts of plants and what have you. And we went out to dinner with Lenny and Armand, Colton and myself. And we get back to the hotel. Well, let's have a couple of pops in the lounge. Go to the lounge, and they have these beautiful palm trees. They weren't that big, but they were in shallow pots. So we were kind of we were sitting there having a couple of drinks, and they have a piano. And hey, Armand, why don't you play piano? So Armand got up, and of course he sits down. He's playing Satin Doll, and he's going on and on. Well, then he got the idea to stand beside one of the palm trees in the pot, and he's swinging with the music, going back and forth. And this tree is starting to list a little bit, and you hear it's starting to crack. And as it's cracking, Lenny's tugging at his belt buckle. And I said, "This can't be good." And the belt buckle's on, the tree is going. So this is going to come down. God bless Colin. He said, "It's probably a good time we leave." So that I'm going to stop playing, Lenny to climb out of the tree pod, and off we went. Another 5 minutes, and that would have been firewood. It was beautiful.
Oh my God. I just wanted to show this quick photo. This was a drum clinic that Simon Phillips did at Wurlitzer Music, Jerry, when I worked there in the early 80s.
Yeah.
It's October 1982. I was working for Wurlitzer, but I was wearing my Zildjian shirt because it was a Zildjian clinic. And I'd met Lenny a couple of times before that, and Rab and David Durrani, you can see was the Zildjian rep at the time, and the guy over my right shoulder is the manager of the store, Larry Green. But Simon, to this day, tells this story that Lenny opened for Simon doing, he had like a bunch of hi-hats set up and a bunch of cymbals on stands, and did his cymbal thing, like to just talk about different hi-hats and different cymbals. And he played with his right hand, played the absolute shit out of these hi-hats. He was doing all his tricks, all the sort of buddy stuff underneath.
Yeah.
And he's playing the ride, playing all that, serious spangalang, like bebop stuff. And Simon has told this story many times. He was nervous as could be after Lenny played. He did not want to follow Lenny. He was like, and he just knew Lenny as this really nice Zildjian man who picked him up at the airport that day. And I think he just met him for the first time that day. And he said, and then he further tells the story. He went out to the Japanese restaurant across the street, this place called Genji House on Newbury Street, and had a great time, as you can imagine. And then Lenny and Rab took Simon to a bunch of jazz clubs, and they hung till like the middle of the night, and I guess he came to pick Simon up the next morning in the same clothes to take him to the airport. And he said, yeah, after I dropped you off last night, I went to another club and I sat in with the band, and and Simon's like, who is this guy? Anyway, yeah. Can't make this stuff up.
No, I remember you'll remember this, Therese. So the first time I met Lenny when I came over, because again, I was, Lenny was, I grew up in England, grew up in London, but Lenny was, internationally well known. I used to read Modern Drummer, religiously, and all the drummers would talk about Lenny DiMuzio and, Lenny picked my cymbals. He was, he was legendary. And I remember when I first started working for Zildjian, I used to do these product trainings, and we'd have this slide presentation. And anybody probably under the age of 40 doesn't know what a slide presentation is, but we had a carousel with all these different slides in there, and one of the slides was of Lenny, and I always remember this. And Lenny had this very serious expression on his face, and he was wearing gray suit pants and like a gray suit vest. And like a purple shirt that's open with his chest showing. He's got like a gold chain and tinted glasses on. He looks like a mafia boss. But very serious. So the first time I met him, I was incredibly intimidated by this guy, legendary Lenny DiMuzio, what he was going to be like. And I remember coming over to Zildjian, I'd say the first time it was in January of 1984. And, back then, the Zildjian offices, it was kind of like it was like Mad Men. There was a secretary pool, and everybody had, booze in their office. And, every Friday, Lenny would take all the secretaries out, for lunch or whatever. It was a very, very, very different atmosphere. But I came over for, training sessions, so I had to spend time with everybody separately. And then, I had assigned my day, to be trained by Lenny DiMuzio, and I was totally like scared about meeting Lenny for the first time, because I thought of him as being this really serious guy. And then I remember it was my training session was at 11:30, and I was going to sit down with Lenny, and we were going to talk about the artist relations program. And of course, I go in, I'm introduced to the Lenny DiMuzio, and it's 11:30, and he's like, you want to go and get lunch? I'm like, it's 11:30, but sure, yeah, we'll go and get lunch in it. And we went to the old restaurant, MacArthur Park. You remember that? You'll remember.
Jerry loved that place.
But what I remember most back then, Lenny had a white Cadillac with leopard skin print seats. All right, that's why he was driving. I remember getting into this car, and it's a white Cadillac, and there's leopard skin, covers on all the seats. And I remember he offered me some chewing gum, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. He had a gold chewing gum case with his initials engraved on it. And it was, and he took, and that was my training session with Lenny. We went to this restaurant, and he ordered, chicken wings and potato skins, and
rack of lamb for one, rack of lamb for two for one.
Yeah, rack of lamb for 2 for 1. And we just chatted and just talked, and he, and he's so you're from England, and from that moment on, you just realize what a pussycat he was, and just the sweetest man in the world. And I have to say, he's been one of the most significant influences in my entire life. Just you know, what he meant to me, what he meant to all of us. You know, there's not a day that goes by that I, you know, don't chuckle to myself thinking about something funny that Lenny or Armand did, because there was so much stuff. You know, they left such a deep impression. So many laughs, and everything you do and see, it reminds you of some funny stories of you know, that Lenny and or Armand did together. You know, it was a very, very special. It was a privilege, absolute privilege to be able to you know, experience any of that. No question.
Absolutely.
It was a real privilege. I just want to say I have to bounce, John. So I'm humbled to have been asked to be a part of this group.
Thank you, Rob.
You guys are, you know, we're all. It was great to do this today, and I know Lenny's 90th birthday is coming up next week, so it was a great time, John, for you to do this. I adore all the memories with him and with you guys and everything we experienced. Exactly what Colin was saying between Armand and Lenny, and the whole picture was just you know, something that I don't take for granted. I think about how lucky I was to be a fly on the wall for so much of it. And I'm still a proud Dr. Poo Poo card carrying member of the Lenny DiMuzio Club.
Very cool.
So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm still carrying the torch. And thanks, John. Everybody take care. It was great.
Thank you, Rob.
Everyone. Really
Yeah, Rob.
All right.
Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
All right.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, and I'm gonna split too. I actually gotta go play drums.
All right. You have a gig tonight, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Have a great
good
gig.
Yeah.
We will.
Yeah.
So great seeing everybody and remembering our good friend, the Heavy Berries.
The Heavy Berries.
Berries.
The Heavy
Jump
Berries.
back,
Yeah.
baby.
The Frenchman.
Jump back.
All right. Jump back, Johnny. Have a great gig tonight. I'm going to quickly read this message from Jim McGathy, and we can all have some closing words. But Jim couldn't join us today, and people that don't know who Jim is, worked for me for many years as artist relations manager, and while Lenny was working at Zildjian still, and got to know Lenny, and Jim put together this beautiful little tribute. He said, "The inimitable Lenny D, I am so grateful to have known Lenny and to have had the privilege and honor of working with him, even for just a short while. Lots of great fun times shared and fond memories, but I mostly remember Lenny for his warm, gracious, friendly, and open manner. He made an indelible impression upon everyone. Lenny always made you feel welcome and part of the gang." Amen. This is what we've all been saying. Lenny, as everyone knows, also was a great storyteller and always funny. I loved all his classic wisdom phrases such as "let the hair go with the hide" and "sleep fast," but especially when he said, "the drum gods are smiling down on us."
Right.
And I'll just add one more that I always love from Lenny, which is the classic, "We're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time." That's a classic Lenny.
Oh,
But Lenny made an art out of his life's work, and I feel I always benefited from being in his company. A sage, artist, and Renaissance human. I will never forget him. Lenny's spirit lives on in all of us who knew and loved him. The drum gods are smiling on us, on all of us today for sure. With love and respect, Jim. Beautiful.
Very
Amen.
nice. Very nice.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen.
Man. Yeah.
But before we wrap up, maybe if we want to just go around and maybe some final words from everybody, or
I'll just say that Lenny he's that one guy that you meet once in a lifetime. Truly.
One in a row.
You'll
Yep.
never ever meet anyone like him ever again.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
He was that man, and just a loving, incredible, unbelievable person. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Beautiful, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking.
Young Paul.
I just, he was just a good teacher and a mentor. He was kind of an adoptive father after my dad passed. And, after my dad passed, he just made sure that I was okay, regularly, and it was just, it was really, really, really great to be able to work with him. And just, I want to tell this funny story that just popped into my head. I remember when Carrie and I were dating, and I brought her to a Christmas party, the famous Zildjian Christmas parties. And she had this really tight black dress on, and he beelined it over to find out who came to the Christmas party with me, and he was shaking her hand. And you know how Lenny could shake somebody's hand, and then the left hand was like rubbing the arm, and it kept moving up higher and higher. And she's like looking at me because Carrie was like, I don't know, 20. And I said, when he unhooks your bra with his left hand, I'll step back. And that's just he was disarming, but it was just very, very funny, because she didn't want to be rude, because obviously he was a colleague and he was older than we were, but and he couldn't remember her name. He was famous for never getting the names right. Okay, her name
He
was
called her Kathy.
Yeah, called her Corinne, Karen, everything but her name. So I just those are the things that I remember. And getting to travel with him, and him being able to fall asleep instantaneously once his ass hit the seat in a plane. I didn't know how he could do it. People had to climb over him, but he was just good people, and he was a good teacher.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mr. Jerry.
Yeah, well, it'd be to improve upon what's been said about Lenny today. He meant so much to so many people in different ways, from business to personal. You couldn't ask for a better friend, a more loyal friend. Armin was certainly blessed to have him on his hip for as long as he did, as was the company, and then on to a different company. That was Lenny. Probably in an industry that's loaded with egos, as we talked about earlier, I think Lenny was probably the most approachable person that I'd ever met. And pleased to have met him and worked with him. Wonderful man.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful. Yeah.
Beautiful baby.
Beautiful
baby. Yeah. Colin, any final words?
I mean, again, I in addition to being so just incredibly funny and fun loving, and as we said, he had this ability to kind of not take anything too seriously, unless it was to do with Buddy Rich, in which case then that was always more serious. But no, he was just an incredibly kind man, and incredibly generous, and very gentle. When when I first moved over from England, and I was in Los Angeles for the first year, but then when I moved to Boston, I didn't know anybody. And, Lenny was he was always looking out for me, and he would invite me out to dinner and be checking on me. And, again, he would literally, I know it's a cliche, but he would literally give you the shirt off his back. He was just incredibly generous, incredibly kind, absolutely do anything for you, and very genuinely so. And Paul, you'll remember this, shortly before he passed away, I had come up to Boston. I'd come up to Norwell, and I had the opportunity to see him, and we were hanging out in the burn room. You remember, Therese, in the house, and I knew how sick he was, and I knew that he didn't have long, and I just told him. I told him everything about how I felt about him, and all the funny times we had. And what he'd meant to me, I say it's the like the most laughs and fun I ever had with my clothes on, as they say. I mean, it's just the funniest guy, and it was really wonderful to have that opportunity to kind of sit with him and talk with him and let him know what he'd meant to me. And I was kind of at peace with everything, after that. And I still have, the voicemail messages that he left me. He'd call up and leave all these funny, messages on the phone. and I still have them on my iPhone. I can't get rid of them. I mean, it's, he as we've all said, we're all very, very blessed to have had the opportunity to be somewhere within his orbit, as it were. He was a very, very unique, very special man, and just one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met.
Very true.
Amen. Yeah. Our old friend Danielle Crowley just happened to tune in. She's watching this live, and I want to give a shout out to her. And John Sorensen sent this photo earlier. I remember some fun times when we'd all go out after work sometimes to like Bella's or the TGI Fridays that was down the street there in Norwell. And, Lenny, we've said this all 1,000 times today, but he just always wanted to have fun. And, he was so comfortable in his own skin that, he would go and hang with a bunch of people that were like, his kids' ages, you know what I mean? And never feel like I'm too old to go hang with you people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think at this point in my life, I'd probably, if my son said, we're all going to go out and hang out, I'd say, you guys go do that. I'm going to go do an old man thing and fall asleep behind the, on the couch at 9:00. But Lenny was just always
ready to go.
Always ready to go. And I say that in a way that I would never want it to sound like that's all he did, because, he really did, work hard and play hard. And he liked to have fun. He loved to be around people. He was in his element around people. Everybody's already said all this stuff already. He was just such a kind person. No, go ahead, Therese. Yeah.
Well, that was why when he asked me to help him with the book, he said, I just want to treasure everybody. And this is my thing. I want to give back to the community. And I want to recognize all of these people because there's nothing like it. And I want to do a story about all my friends. And they weren't just his friends, they were family, an extension of who he was, and all of the great memories going back to Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and way back to the early days of music, and just documenting the history and maybe a little story and bringing it up to the present day until he was very sick. And he still said, Tootie, we got to get this book done.
Yeah.
I'd say, Dad, we'll finish. But it was his goal. And he was a fighter. And he just, would go down in New York and work on the book and come back. And he said, yeah, I have about 200 more photos. I said, Dad, cut off. We're going to print. I said, we can't. And then I said, those funny pictures that you wanted to put in? He says, yeah, I like those. Let's keep them. I said, no, you can't keep those. We have to take them out. I go, because he was sick and he was going through chemo and radiation. And I said, what if you want to give the book to your priest? And he says, oh, you're right. I said, I'm taking those photos out. We'll have an A version and an X version if you want it. But that was his just goal, is to, I knew that the prognosis wasn't great, and but he was a fighter, and he wanted to really embellish everyone's friendship and try to put it within the 400 pages. And it was tough for him, but he was certainly a fighter, and he wanted to do a second novel. And that was his goal. But the big man upstairs, as he said, rang the bell, and he had to answer. And
I'm sure Armand was waiting for him.
Yeah.
The cocktail in his hands.
Oh yeah, toddy for the body.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah.
Something to calm
Lenny,
the nerves.
What took you so long, Lenny? Yeah. And my favorite would be, we'd go to Cecilia is watching, Lenny's other daughter, Cecilia is watching, and she said, Johnny, do your impersonation of Lenny ordering food. And it would be a classic when he'd order every appetizer on the menu, of course, but he'd be like, I'll have a little something to steady my nerves, or the classic, just to be polite. Right. And it's just, I still laugh at that. It's just like one of those things that a Lennyism that has stuck with me for 35 years. Like, just to be polite. But Therese, the book is still available, right? People can still buy this.
Yep. Just
okay.
It's on Amazon.
Okay. So everybody watching, you can still buy this through Amazon.com. Really simple. And I'll make note of that in the description of this episode when we post it. This is going to be posted
if they want. I can send.
Okay. Yep. Great. And this episode will be posted on Lenny's birthday, May 4th, which would have been his 90th birthday,
Wow.
which is next Thursday. It'll be up on YouTube, on my YouTube and Modern Drummers YouTube. And yeah, I mean, I like you guys, I'm sure we all have about a dozen more stories. I want to quickly just speak on behalf of my kids who got to know Lenny when they were really, really little. Colin, you remember I'd bring them like on a Friday when I'd have them for the weekend, and it would still be the middle of the day. And I thought about this morning, talking to my son, texting my son, and they called him Uncle Lenny, and he always had a jar of candy on his desk. And they'd sneak off to as John Sorensen talked about, he had the best office in the building. He had these curtains, and it was like this secret cave, and I'd go find them in there, and Lenny'd be on the phone, and he'd look at me and he'd go, it's okay, Johnny. It's okay. That's all right. They can stay, and they'd be eating, peppermint candies or playing with the little trinkets on his desk. They used to sneak into Jerry's office too. And they, can we go visit Uncle Lenny? I said, no, don't bother Uncle Lenny. Please. And then Lenny would say, yeah, Johnny, it's fine, But yeah, I mean, God, amazing guy. Well, thank you all so much for being here today, and I'm so glad we could do this.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting
God
it
bless.
together, John. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you.
Great
Good job.
Pleasure, Bill.
Anything
thank-
for Lenny.
And
Yeah, anything for Lenny.
everybody.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so once again, I want to thank Therese DiMuzio, Lenny's daughter, Colin Schofield, Wild Bill Morgan, the VP of all VPs, Jerry Donegan, young Paul Francis, no longer as young as he used to be, but he's still a young man.
He's still young.
And his new venture, making cymbals. Thanks to Rob Wallace and John Sorensen, who were also with us. And happy birthday, Lenny. We love you. God bless
Happy
you.
birthday, Lenny.
Mhm.
Happy
Happy
Back,
birthday.
baby.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you
You
guys.
all.
All right.
All right. That's my show. Thanks for listening. You can watch episodes of Live from My Drum Room live in real time on Facebook Live by following my Facebook page, Live from My Drum Room with John DeChristopher, and also my YouTube channel, Live from My Drum Room with John DeChristopher. And while you're there on YouTube, check out my new show, TrackTalk, iconic songs with iconic drum parts and the drummers who created them. It's really cool. Check it out. Shorter episodes. You'll love it. And TrackTalk is only available as part of my Live from My Drum Room series on my Live from My Drum Room YouTube channel and podcast platforms. So please subscribe. All Live from My Drum Room and TrackTalk podcasts are available on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc. Also want to give a big thanks to my friend Steve Gadd for providing the music for my show. That's really Steve. And remember, no drummers are harmed during any episodes of Live from My Drum Room or TrackTalk. So drummers, remember, when in doubt, leave it out, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.